I'm Mickey Turner.
Hello, are we on the air?
We're on the air, or the internet, or something, whatever you call it these days. Welcome to SonarFeed episode 282, Hate Portland Week. We could have called it so many things, but that just seemed like the obvious choice that we needed to go with. We're down here at the Berliner Pub in downtown Renton.
4th and Main.
Those guys are the best.
That was pretty good, actually.
That was good.
It was quite.
We both slow played it and
Yes.
were super effective at the same time. So what's going on?
Oh, not much. I'm a little tired. Got in
So did
early
you
this morning.
I was still out, and I saw you check in at the airport, and I was like, "Oh, Mickey Turner just got home. Cool."
Yeah, I don't advise taking 11 o'clock flights ever, unless you're going
Like just in
overseas.
general?
Yeah, unless you're going overseas or you have a sadomasochistic streak. But it kind of sucked. But I did sleep on the plane. But getting in at 1 o'clock and then having to get home was just the final leg of the journey was just was very tedious.
Well,
But
you survived.
yes,
You
and
made
it was
here.
and it was a fun trip. So yeah, it was worth the pain.
So let's just set the stage. We have a lot of things to talk about. We can talk a little bit about preview Portland coming up Friday night. We could talk a little bit about LA away, both the game, which was interesting,
And the afters or during
the pre, post, during. We could talk about the fact that you ran around town and did some athletic type things.
it was an approximation of an athletic endeavor. I wouldn't
You were
call it
slightly athletic
Yes.
while you were there. I would love to hear about any other shenanigans that happened because LA is always good for something random.
Yeah.
Which is good. And then there was that other game earlier in the week.
Do we really want to talk about that?
I mean, we technically should talk about it. We can just avoid it altogether. But more importantly, there was this, weird ownership thing that happened with the Sounders. So we should.
I definitely want to talk about that.
We should probably talk about that. So, again, you hit up the LA away. So why don't you give us your happy recap? And by happy, you mean thank God we got a point.
Yeah, that was. So the game, obviously, everyone, I assume, watched it. The first 5 minutes, the Sounders looked terrible and had to rely on Fry to make an incredible save. Then they looked good, and then Ruiz does a great job to get a man sent off. It was funny in the press box. I was surrounded by a lot of LA Galaxy media, and they were just complaining, nonstop about the red card. I was like, it was clear as day. Last man,
maybe don't get a red card.
Yeah, maybe don't drag down a guy after he beats you. I mean, rely on your keeper. Although considering who their keeper is, maybe they don't want to do that.
It's a
So maybe
different
the red card.
discussion. But
Yeah. But then after that, they looked terrible again for most of the rest of the half. I haven't watched the replay yet, but it sounded like Twelman and Champion, who were calling the game, were just giving it to the Sounders pretty nonstop. And that they were, it's hard to. They weren't wrong. They were wrong.
your helicopters here.
Yes, the ghetto birds are on full force.
Yeah. Has your home or office, has your podcast been rated by the FBI? Not yet, but it's still early.
Yeah, the
Just
night
started.
Is young. The night is young. So they looked terrible until, and they scored, which, they did a good job to get the goal. It was kind of a sloppy goal, but they did well to, kind of get the build-up going. And then the second half, they looked obviously much better, but they gave up, a goal and a penalty to Zlatan. So obviously it was at the end of the first half.
He's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
He's a decent player.
Yeah. But the strategy was pretty clear once they got the red card, which was to basically bunker and then boot it up to Zlatan and see what he could do. And the answer was he could do a fair amount. And the Sounders, obviously outpossessed them. They outshot them. Their finishing was not very good. They had a bunch of half/2/3 chances that they couldn't finish. And then they get the most ridiculous of own goals. That's Bingham plus the Galaxy backline equals hilarity. And after that point, they looked great. The Sounders did. I thought they obviously should have scored. They probably should have scored a couple of goals, but they weren't able to. And after the game, going down to the locker room, you could just see the look of dejection on their face. I just remember Fry just sitting there, just kind of staring off into space.
Yeah.
And they, Leardom was upset, but he kind of put it in perspective. It is still a point on the road, and again,
which we all probably would have been okay with.
Oh, absolutely.
All up.
Are you kidding me? Yeah.
But I think after the prior match, and a handful of prior matches, but after the midweek match, you maybe hoped for better, especially getting that early red. You're like, oh, okay.
They played 90 game minutes up with a man, including extra time and all that stuff. So that should get you, and did get them a couple of goals. But even if it is Zlatan, how do you allow him to score, or the Galaxy to score twice? I mean, maybe the answer is he's just that good, or the Seattle back line at this point is just that bad. The answer to those,
the answer is yes.
Might be the answer right now. And Schmetzer after the game was like, we got to figure out how to get the confidence back in these guys. Which, okay, that's a fine thing to say, but what are you going to do to get that confidence going? And obviously we'll talk about Portland coming up, but that's going to be a rough game, even if I don't think Portland's as great as many people think. They're dropping points at home here pretty regularly.
Well, I mean, they get
now.
to play at home enough in a row, so
the odds kind of figure that they're going to drop some points here and there. But they dropped a fair amount of points, but they just have so much speed on the counterattack, and you just wonder if the Sounders get too far up the field and start trying to attack. What's going to happen on the back end is you get like 4 or 5 Timbers racing down the field. It could get ugly, and then obviously we have the Cascadia Cup on the line, and that's going to add another element. But we can talk about that a little bit later. So
yeah,
I guess wrapping up, LA. I think the sentiment was that they knew they blew a golden opportunity to grab all 3 points, and that would have put them back in second place, I think, or
at this point,
maybe,
or 7th,
and again, the results go their way, the Sounders' way, and because everyone else tied or lost at LAFC, at this point you just root for them to beat up on everybody,
right?
Because you're not getting anywhere near them, and so they did a favor for the Sounders beating RSL on the road. So I don't know. It's I don't know how to feel about a 1-1 result given how poorly they played over the last month, but given the fact that they were up a man for an entire game and still gave up 2 goals, both of which were probably preventable. Okay, the first one I would say, all right, Zlatan just he's Zlatan, and he beat Kim to a header. And all right, fair enough. But the second one, he just, a ball that he probably wasn't going to get to, and then Kim just drags him down, basically. And, maybe Zlatan goes down a little easy. But Kim had his hands all over him. They're going to call that 9 times out of 10.
He's going to get the call.
Yeah. So now you have to, Arriaga, I think, had a much better game than he's had recently.
Well, it's definitely about the shirt. Tucked in or not?
Yeah.
I believe it was untucked.
Yeah, it was untucked.
Yeah. So I'm going with that. I have no empirical data to prove this at all. I'm just going with my judgment of people who tuck shirts in on the soccer field.
And so we got training this week. I think they're going to train. They're leaving Thursday. I know that much.
Okay.
They're going to train, and then travel. So they're going to spend an overnight in Portland before the game. And so that's at least, they'll start training tomorrow. So assuming they get 3 days of training in. And we'll see if there are any reinforcements in the midfield in terms of foreign signings who haven't gotten their visa yet.
I don't know what you're talking about. Any other just like player takeaways? And I do want to talk about like Schmetzer's comments, and I think the Fry observation and some other things. But like any other just game observations or specific player things?
I would say, again, the problem is they were terrible for most of the first half. So you basically, Rui Diaz was probably the best player in the first half because he converted the one chance that he, he may have had another.
He's okay.
Yeah,
that guy's good.
So he did well, and I think Morris was pretty decent for the most part. he helped set up the goal and then set up the own goal. So it's, I would say, give Morris pretty decent marks. But again, the problem I see is the problem that they continue to have is that their midfield cannot get the ball off of the opposing team. They still lack a number 6 who can really just break up passes, break up plays, and really just turn things once the ball gets turned over into a counter or just into an attack.
Yeah.
And that's the same problem they've had the entire year. I remember in preseason they played a game against Dallas in Tucson, and Dallas was just passing the ball around them the entire time, and it was just that has to me been their Achilles heel, notwithstanding the loss of Marshall and Torres.
Sure. But
just from a tactical perspective, they just have not been able to figure out how to get teams off the ball and get more turnovers and get out in transition.
Well, and I think that's a part where, personally, I'm surprised that between Roldan and someone else, they haven't quite figured that out. And again, maybe with Goose now being back a little bit, like let's get some different chemistry out there, because that's a role that those players can play, at least to some extent. Maybe not permanently, and obviously not at the Ozzy Alonso kind of level. But it's a pretty glaring hole.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's, bluntly I'll say, is that's always been the case when Alonso has been hurt over the last N years. So the fact that that hasn't necessarily been addressed. Now, no one expects you to have Torres suspended and Chad Marshall retire and. So things that were potentially covered up by really good, solid defenders are now glaring omissions.
Major problems.
And, there's things that, like, Kim does really well. Like, there's times where he just retrieves the ball off someone, and then he's on a dime, puts it on someone's chest 30 yards down the field, and there's things he does really well, but he and a couple of other players look like they're in the I can't do this alone mode way too often.
Yeah, and actually what I saw a lot was, this is obviously frustration for most of the game when they were losing especially, but they were just very slow, methodical. Their passes were kind of side to side. There were some miscommunications where they would make fairly rudimentary passes that they would zig when the pass called for a zag, and then so they get crossed up, and then you can see them shrugging their shoulders, putting their hands out, and saying, what are you doing here? And so
that's a not very common Sounders thing, and we've seen it at key points in the last, call it 5 years, and a lot of those points have not been good all up. And, this is not that SKC match with terrible passing and dumb wire and. Like, we're not at that point. But the loss of chemistry or lack of chemistry, maybe, both, actually, and, like, some of the dejectedness is not very Sounders.
Yeah, that is not something we have. I'm not sure that is something we have seen even in the dire days. Granted, I was not, covering the team, so I don't have a great reference. Maybe, the people who were at training every day saw something else, but this feels a little different. And the thing is that they're, as opposed to those years when they were having these terrible stretches, they're not digging themselves out of a hole to get in the playoffs. They're still in reasonable position. So, I guess things could be worse is the bottom line.
I don't know if that's good, though. It's like, we happen to be already in the playoffs, so we can skate a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
the neighbors really want to play the music and let us listen tonight, so it's cool. Anyway.
So it's a different thing right now. And so I'm just, they'll train this week, and who knows what happens in Portland. They've done reasonably well down there over the years. It's not like they get killed every single time. They have an occasional bad game, but they're at least usually competitive, and they won down there last year. And so they've got all the motivation in the world, but they don't seem to have the confidence right now to put into place a system that they can execute that will allow them to fix what ails them. And again, for me, you've got two main issues. The back line is just completely different than what they expected this year, and then again, I still think the midfield creating turnovers is a major problem that they haven't been able to fix, because they've been fine offensively. Salt Lake accepted. I mean, that was just a terrible performance all the way around, but they've been scoring.
It just kept getting worse.
Yes, yeah, it was. Yep. So that I would just throw that out. It's not even worth really discussing that. But they've been scoring goals. They're averaging a couple of goals a game over the last month against Salt Lake accepted. So it's obvious where the problem is at this point. The problem is they don't know how to fix it. It appears.
Right. Well, and it feels like anytime they change a thing, it doesn't net out. It nets out the same.
Yeah.
And I think for me, a concern is dejected Fry. Not like yelling in the middle of the match Fry, but like post-game dejected Fry.
Yeah.
Because if there's been one player that over however many years this is now has always been able to keep a really nice, tidy goals against average, even when Sounders were losing matches.
Yeah, they were losing
drawing,
1-0.
1-0. Or like somehow they break out a 0-0, whatever, and have been beat for most of the match. And that's where it is, I would say, both defensive lapses as well as just they're getting beat by players consistently. But that's where like morale and other things I think come into play, and that's not something I feel like we've really had to talk about in quite some time.
Well, the interesting thing is, at practice last week, they had a kind of a team building drill, like just a contest. It was, and it was amusing to watch. There was lots of shenanigans going on. Nika was cheating by kicking the ball away as they were about to start to drill from one of his teammates, and everyone's cracking up, having a good time, and still competing. And yeah, that was last week. And so, if that's not working, then you just have to wonder what can get them out of this funk. And
5-0 versus Portland. I mean that would work.
Yeah, that would do quite nicely. And again, Portland's I don't think they're as good as people make them out to be. And they at some point, as they say, your record is what it says it is. Maybe they win the next 7 of 8 down the stretch at home, and the tune changes. But at this point, they're still behind the Sounders, and the Sounders can go down there and hopefully get a win, because I think as Atlanta showed, LAFC showed, it's possible. And San Jose, I think I got a result, a tie against them. I know Orlando got a tie against them in Portland. So again, it's not like Portland is impenetrable at home. So we'll see. I'm interested.
A lot of home matches in a row.
Yeah,
so
I think it's 10 in a row.
7 more.
They're in the process of 10 in a row.
And like they're rolling through. So Sounders, RSL, SKC, DCU, Red Bulls, Minnesota, New England, and then they're away end of September in.
Yeah, they've got that's a tough schedule. That's Sporting Kansas City accepted, who again they managed to win this weekend. None of those games are gimmies. But they have the benefit of being at home. So we'll see what happens down there. But we'll see what happens up here as far as them getting Cecchini. How do you pronounce his name?
I always would learn this as Cecchini.
I know it's kind of got an Italian bent based on.
But it's like double C is Ch.
Yeah.
And
Cecchini.
Cecchini. I'd go the other way, but whatever. He actually knows what he's talking about. I'm just on the internet.
So hopefully he will be available this week. And speaking of LA and Pavone, who didn't really do a whole lot, although he was pretty. I'm not going to betray anything, but the Sounders are. I could just say they are bemused at how quickly he was able to get his visa, based on the timing of when that contract signing was announced. And we have a special guest in the chat. And should we answer his question?
We should definitely answer this question.
Alexi Lawless asks, would you rather beat Portland or make the playoffs?
It's a great question, Alexi Lawless.
I'll let you take that one to start. Who? Who's asking the question? Alexi Lawless.
Who's that?
Oh, you got me.
JJ says beat Portland in the playoffs. I'm going to answer this two ways. Like right now, emotionally, I want to beat Portland. I think there's a point where I don't ever want to give up the playoff streak that Sounders have.
Yeah.
I think they need to beat Portland in a really bad way.
Yeah.
That said, making the playoffs is what matters, because at the end of the day, in a lot of sports, it is like the ultimate crapshoot in this league, especially with new format. You never know. Get on a run, make a move. And I think if you get out of this game healthy, like don't get injured, take a draw, like walk away, move on. I think for the team's long-term health, making the playoffs is the right call.
Yeah, that's it. That's the right answer. If the Sounders didn't have their playoff streak, which they are certainly proud of,
and that does play into this.
Yeah, that may be a different situation, and it also because of where the Sounders are in the standings, they're in prime position to still move up to second place, and so they're
so it's
3 points behind or 2 points behind Minnesota. So
right,
a win here,
a victory, everybody else loses. Yeah. You're in second, which is nuts.
But I guess the answer is if his question poses that you cannot make the playoffs.
Binary.
Yeah. My answer would be you want to make the playoffs.
Make the playoffs.
I think that's the correct answer.
It is. And I don't want to say I want to lose against Portland. I will never say that.
Yeah.
But if you told me right now I had to choose, I want to make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
All up.
Yeah. Because again, the playoffs then presents you the chance to win the MLS Cup, which is something you could lord over Portland, even if you go 0 for 3 against them this year, including the Open
let's not
Cup
do
game.
that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my answer.
So maybe sticking to Portland for a second. As we think about new teams coming into the league, new stadiums, what we saw with DC last year that was, right?
Yeah,
the new
Audi
last year.
Or Audi.
What I think we can recognize is teams are able to get real streaky with home, and the league being, frankly, lenient on how it allows either new teams or refurbished stadiums to be done is honestly penalizing everybody else in the divisions of those clubs. And there is a pattern there. And at some point, like, we've got to pick one or the other. Either you have to have a SSS or you don't, or like things have to happen in a certain time period. Like, it just feels like that it is creating advantages that unfair is not the right word. It's creating an advantage where there doesn't have to be one.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what's obviously changed is they've given the new expansion teams a boatload of TAM and GAM.
Sure.
I think they're getting upwards of $2 to $3 million in that funding money, and most of the teams do a reasonable job of appropriating that money, although not all, like Cincinnati and
good use of appropriating.
Minnesota also had some major problems, but LAFC obviously did a great job, but they obviously had the benefit of ownership that was willing to spend a lot of money, and I think that's where the differentiator is right now. Is you've got teams like LAFC and Atlanta who just shot out of the gate and decided we're going to spend, we're going to invest, and we're going to bring in a bunch of high-priced South American talent. And then you had Minnesota, who kind of went to the European model of buying a bunch of players in TAM, and they missed on basically all of them. And that's what set them back for a year, and that's what's going to set Cincinnati back for a year or two. And then you see Miami, and you see the same thing happening with Miami and Nashville. Miami's about to bring in a bunch of big guns, and then Nashville hasn't really done anything. So we'll just have to see, and I don't know how that's going to affect things in the future, especially with teams like the Sounders bringing in new ownership to take the place of their previous big money guy, and I don't know.
So let's just dive in there.
Yes.
Do you want to start with Macklemore, or where do you want to go?
So the Sounders had an event today introducing most of their owners actually, and obviously the high-profile ones were Macklemore, Russell Wilson, and Sierra. Did they live stream that or anything like that?
There was a link.
There was a link. Okay, so people got to watch it. So, it was kind of a cheesy, marketing kind of self-help, thing, which probably doesn't appeal so much to the Sounders hardcore fan base, but the kids seem to enjoy it, and so that's the Sounders got what they wanted out of it. Unfortunately, Sierra and Macklemore and Russell Wilson were not available for a press scrum, so we didn't get to ask them any questions. But it was a fine event, and Meyerson, Terry Meyerson, I think is his name. He seems to be the heavy behind the Seattle Football LLC, which is the group that encompasses Wilson, Sierra, et cetera, and what's going to be interesting to see, and they've Adrian's answered this question 1,000 times in probably 1,000 different ways, is how this new investor group is going to affect or change what is the Sounders' operating philosophy business-wise.
Not operating budget.
Yeah. Well, it's just, he says that they want to maintain and operate a sustainable business model, which basically means to me that they're willing to spend to their means, but they're basically willing to spend their checking account to zero, but they're not willing to dip into the savings, if that makes sense. So they're, that is how I kind of analogize what they're willing to do. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do as far as the first team investment, because it sounds like they're about to make some major investments in their infrastructure with the training facility, because they announced I think last week that they're in the middle of a feasibility study, and they may in fact end up leaving Starfire if they can find a better deal elsewhere.
I mean, we've been talking about this for literal years.
Yeah,
but
so
now,
it sounds like
this maybe the
I think we'll probably get an announcement of some sort within the next 60 to 90 days.
It's like a slow play right here. Mickey's like, I already have the press
No,
release.
I do not have anything on unfortunately. But I think there's going to be an announcement in the next 2 to 3 months about the training facility, and so I think on that front, what they're trying to decide is Starfire sufficient to the point where they can just build that out, or is it they go up to Northgate where the NHL is building their and partner with them and build out some massive sports complex. And I think that just depends on what kind of deal they can get from either place. Because Starfire has been good to them, but they acknowledge that it is in the bottom, probably third of training facilities now, whereas previously it was probably top 2 or 3 when they came into the league. And so we'll just have to wait and see on the feasibility study and what it has to say. But selfishly, I'd like them to stay at Starfire because it makes my job getting out there pretty easy. And of course, this isn't going to be built next year. This is like a 2 or 3 year process, depending on what they decide to do. I suppose if they decide to, build out Starfire, they can obviously do that while they continue to train there. But either way, they're going to be at Starfire for a couple 3 years. And what I would love to know is what they decide their potential options are as far as where they go if they decide to move. Because there's land available around here, especially in the suburbs, to build out a big training complex. And there's a lot of money to be made if they build out something that they own or operate even, and get a bunch of training fields and do something like Starfire, but that they own or operate. And so they get to run all the tournaments and make all the money from all the youth tournaments and camps, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of money to be made there. So, and I think that's probably why, in part, what they want to leave Starfire, is aside from the fact that the amenities aren't up to snuff anymore.
It's the parking. It's about the parking.
Yeah, there's that too. And so I think they just decide. I think they decide they're ready to make that play. And so I'm definitely interested to see what the results of that are.
So that's a possible outcome here.
Yeah.
You touched a little bit on who a few of the players were.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the move to bring in a ton of local regional families was like a defensive move once the word got out that Joe was going to sell his share, because it was obviously like some capital down from Southern California that wanted in, and
I'm like.
or do you think that was like a straight up strategic decision?
Oh, I think so. I think 100% it was a strategic decision to get these guys in. I don't know how serious. It sounds like it was fairly serious. The venture capital group was making a play to take over the Sounders entirely. So take over Adrian's share and just basically own it outright.
Let's not do that.
And who knows? Like, I don't think they were going to take over the team and then move them to Sacramento next year. I mean, that would be ridiculous. But in 10 years, when the lease is up at CenturyLink Field, maybe they want their own stadium, and maybe they want the city or the state or the county to pay for it. And when those entities tell this new ownership group to take a hike, they're like, all right, well, we're just going to go ahead and take off for greener pastures.
Let's not do that again.
Yes, if that sounds familiar, it should.
It's exhausting.
It should, because it happened in 2008 when the Sonics left. And so, yeah. So I think that, I don't think that was an immediate concern, but I think it was something that was staring them, down the line, because who knows what CenturyLink Field's going to be like in 10 years. I mean, when was it built? 98, I think. So,
a little later, as Quest, right?
Yeah, it's Quest. So anyway, by 2028, it's basically 30 years old at that point. And then, so who knows what the Seahawks are going to want to do with it?
Stop dating us.
Yes,
Nick Turner, come on.
So yeah,
there were some good comments. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say. So I think there was definitely some looking down the line and saying, if we don't stop this here, then who knows what's going to happen in 5 to 8 years. And I think that's when they decided, because the Sounders are profitable. I don't think they're making boatloads of money, but they're certainly in the top, probably 5 of MLS teams as far as revenue and income and profit. But again, it's just one of those things where that was attractive for a venture capital firm to come in and say, hey, these guys are making money in MLS where probably 75% of the teams aren't. And so, let's come in and maybe shake some things up and leverage this down the line to potentially move or something like that. So fortunately, that's not going to happen.
And all of this though seemed like it actually took a lot longer of a time to assemble. And Adrian had said, I don't remember if it was in the press conference or in the announcement, whatever, but there was some statement about like when he and Joe had talked to each other about Joe kind of stepping out of this.
Sounds like it was about 15 to 18 months ago.
Yeah, like that's a good amount of time. And that's when you're like, oh, well, that's how you assembled that, frankly, caliber of people. It's just really interesting to see. And I guess a lot of the joking on Twitter, etc., ECS Slack, wherever, was about like, oh, well, I didn't really like the LAFC model of ownership, but it seems to be working for them. So maybe leaning in that direction is a good idea. Lowercase d diversification, like truly bringing in people with various levels of income and stature and how they are part of the community, whatever you want to say. It's at the moment doesn't seem like a bad idea.
Well, just think of what those various individuals are going to allow the Sounders, what doors are going to open to the Sounders that were never there before in the entertainment industry, in other sports. I asked Adrian about getting back in bed with Microsoft, and having this number of tech executives and folks like that. Maybe they revisit a deal with Xbox or Microsoft at large down the line, and so there's some benefit to having those various that diversity allows you into places that maybe you weren't even thinking about looking. But people who may want to do business with you. So now you've got someone to bring you to the door. And so I think that's going to be an interest, because I think that's where they think that the next opportunity is to grow their revenue, is with additional sponsors and things like that. And the way to do that is to get people in, again, diverse backgrounds to get you meetings
Sure.
that you maybe that weren't able to get before. So I think Adrian seemed pretty high on that. And the other, because one of the questions people were asking was, what is this new investor group? What does it mean as far as how the Sounders are going to invest, specifically in the first team? And Adrian's answer was, well, this isn't new money. These guys just paid Joe Roth out, and so, can you grab?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Oh, he wants to. I'm good, thanks. And so, yeah, these guys they didn't just throw $60 million into the Sounders checking account, as I said in an earlier example. That money went to go pay Joe Roth out. So they still need to grow their revenue, and I think the way they think they can do that is with this all-star team, quote unquote, of owners, and do it kind of similar to the LAFC model. So, I'm not a business guy, and I don't pretend to be, but I think one of the things that this new ownership group, I'll be interested to see what kind of investment they're planning to make in the operations side, because when there's a DP out there who's interested in signing with the Sounders, but is going to take a $9 million transfer fee, that's when the cash calls start from the ownership groups to put that out there. And so, are the Sounders prepared to get that money from those investors? Are they prepared to invest it? Or is it something where the Sounders will say, okay, we've got $9 million in our checking account and we'll spend it on this DP? I don't know what, again, their philosophy is a sustainable business model, so I don't know if they're prepared to invest on that level, or if they're just trying to leverage these guys to increase their revenues so they can spend more because the bank account's bigger. I don't know.
I think it's, at the end of the day, it's good, all up. I think there was a lot of bluntly animosity towards Joe Roth after some specific things that happened a few years ago. And frankly, locality matters. People like to know that people in their community are behind a thing that they care about. Yeah. So, whether you like or hate the NFL, having somebody at the caliber, whatever stature of a Macklemore or Russell Wilson or anybody that's involved in different scenes that aren't necessarily what Sounders folks may actually care about, I think that's good.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of comments about this was kind of a flat thing and does it really matter? And ultimately it does. You're not going to see the payoff from it for a hot minute. So I think we need to see stuff you talked about before, investment in other things, just attitude changes, what sponsors start to get involved, are they attracting just fans from different places, whatever the heck those things are.
What changes the Sounders make to how they run, the team, because you bring in new owners.
They're going to have an opinion.
Yeah, they're going to have an opinion. So, that's certainly something that can come into play. And so, like I said, I'm interested to see how this changes how they run things, if at all. Because Adrian said, and we haven't been able to get this out of him, if he's the actual majority owner, if he owns 50 plus 1%, or if he's just the plurality like he was with when it was just him and Joe and Drew and Paul Allen. He said he increased his investment, but he was at 35%, so maybe he went to 40. Or, again, maybe he went to 50 plus 1. He says that he's the one that's going to be making the decision. So he's got more of a share than the other, 14 now, is it? Something along those lines? Yeah. So he's got
10 plus.
Yeah, more than 10. So he's going to be the one who the buck stops with as far as decision-making is concerned.
So I think there's a few things we could dig in on still. There's some questions. If we could magically anoint another Cascadia or Northwest Region MLS team, what city would you choose? And again, the answer is Boise. But the chat agrees, but I don't know. I have an opinion.
Northwest, so we'll say Seattle, or not Seattle,
NorCal
Washington,
up.
NorCal out. I mean, there's not a whole lot of options, honestly.
I'm going to say there isn't one.
Yeah. Tacoma is probably the only reasonable option, which I think goes into another question he asked later. But
yeah,
I think that's the answer. I mean, yeah, okay, Spokane.
It'd be funny.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, there's zero chance that those cities would pass what MLS wants. But assuming we were doing some type of hybrid pro-rel thing where you can add in potential cities, Tacoma's probably the number one answer.
Again, let's just get to 40.
Yeah.
And then have MLS 1 and 2. I mean, it worked for arena football. And then we'll be good. I'm genuinely going to say no to this.
Yeah, I do not think there, like, not to be flip, there is not.
Where would you, genuinely, where would you put it that you straight up are going to get 20,000 plus every week?
Yeah.
I mean, it's still kind of a little more, not central, but that's not Pacific Northwest.
That's definitely not. Yeah.
Sacramento was commented on here. There's an interesting comment from Hunch Bunch about, put a soccer-specific stadium in Bellevue, like, do some interesting things. Yeah, from like a look at a map of London
yeah,
kind of way. Sure. I don't know if we're there right now. And frankly,
No.
traffic is definitely not there right now. And frankly, there are enough people like me who are like, I'm not going to Bellevue for anything. And then work is like, you're going to Bellevue. And I'm like, I guess I'm going to Bellevue. I don't, it's not a ding on Seattle to say it couldn't have two teams, but why do you need two teams? Like, I'm sorry, but New York, New Jersey doesn't need two teams. Like, fill your stadiums consistently, and one is a lot better than the other right now. That's even a tough call.
Yeah.
And there's 15 million people in that 50-mile radius.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, New York obviously has its own issues just with how they
how they
support
transit and this and that.
Well, and just how they support professional soccer. There's a bunch of other options. Obviously, people kind of talked about those.
There's
those
things
issues
to do other than soccer.
Yeah, and the soccer that people decide to watch is typically not the Red Bulls at this point, which is in part probably because of how they decided to market the team.
Sure.
And the changes that they made and the location of their stadium, even though it's not terrible. So they've had a whole other sort of assortment of issues that have contributed to what has to be said is terrible attendance out there. And MLS wanted to be in the city proper, and they decided to take a bunch of shortcuts. Right, and now they're going to be in Yankee Stadium forever.
I don't actually think it's going to change.
I don't think what I've heard, and this is secondhand information or probably even thirdhand information. So I don't want to claim that sources tell me that anything's happening, but
Sources say.
Sources say. But all the chatter I've heard is that they are no closer to a stadium solution than they were before they got into the league and they got down. I think, was it Queens that they say they almost had a deal with?
It's just super dumb.
Yeah.
But like this, bluntly, this is one of the best examples of why to literally not believe anything MLS says. Like, here's our policy. You have to have this. And then they have NYCFC. And then they re-up their lease.
Yep.
And it's like 50% of game discussion is about how the field isn't big enough.
Yeah. Well,
like,
yeah.
on every broadcast, someone talks about it.
Well, like people slide and carpet goes flying. It's like in pallet-sized turf comes up.
There was that great rain game last year, or the year before. Like, that was amazing.
Great.
And by great, I mean awful.
Right.
But it looked cool. As in, it's fun to watch people slide around in a lot of water.
Yeah.
I will say this, as someone who lived in Boise twice, you've got a large population in Salt Lake City. Watched that whole city shut down for PSV games.
Should come up here.
All right. The comment is on Boise, and actually, I think that would be certainly a good USL
You
market.
should definitely play on the blue for a little while. As horrible as that would be to watch.
It would look amazing.
Playing on the Smurf turf would be.
But
Yeah.
the city absolutely shuts down and supports their teams.
Yeah.
And that is
No, they at minimum they should be in the USL at minimum.
For sure.
And
300 nice days a year.
In fact, there are other USL clubs that should move to Boise. Like,
Well, I
straight
think-
up. So,
my hunch is that they're going to end up there. USL will end up there in the next 3 years.
Sounders 3.
Yeah. Let's hope that's not the case. But yeah, I think they're trying to pass the stadium, a deal, as so many are, kind of, similar to Tacoma, and so I absolutely see them, in the league in the next 3 or 4 years, if not before. They can get something done on the stadium front, which is obviously, but it makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons for USL. It'll connect a little bit with obviously Seattle and or Tacoma, and Portland and Salt Lake and all Reno and all.
What's
that
a
good
Portland?
Stuff. T2. We'll say it that way. So I think
It's a city in Maine.
yes, that is true. So I think they will definitely be in. So, but again, to finish up the original question, there aren't enough population bases out here to support a team in the way that they are currently supported by MLS. As you said, this isn't London where you've got 16 teams, and each city or borough, whatever you want to call it, only has like 100,000 people, but like 80,000 of them are going to the game or supporting the team. That's just not happening here. So you're not going to get, as you say, Seattle, Tacoma. You're not going to get the 40,000 in Seattle and the 18,000, say, in Tacoma.
Yeah.
Similar to the difference of, say, Arsenal and Crystal Palace or something like that. So
Let's not talk about Crystal Palace right now. Like, that's just an unfortunate situation. There's a Renton FC call in the chat, so if anyone wants to get on that, buy some shirts.
And
yeah.
there are no cities in the United States that support teams on that micro level like they do in any sport, save college basketball, I would say.
Yeah.
Where you could have 2 or 3 colleges within a 30-mile radius and get decent support for all of them.
But that's where, again, College Town is just legit built-in support.
Yeah. And
literally anywhere you go, you're like, 50,000 people live X place. All of them are at every basketball game, whatever the heck it is. So
it doesn't happen in any professional sport in the United States, so it's certainly not going to happen in MLS.
So you're saying not Boise?
Yeah. Well, not for MLS. No, sorry. I don't think I'm breaking any
Is Boise still in the catchment area? I can't remember.
I think it's Portland's.
Is that what happened? We still have Hawaii.
Yeah. Seattle's Hawaii, and there's like maybe a pocket of California that they have at this point. And then, Portland has Boise for reasons.
Whatever.
Although I think that's going away from what I heard, so I don't think it's any big secret that I think they're just going to say you can sign whatever players are interested in coming to your area, which would be good because it would mean that the teams would have to step up their recruitment, investment, and coaching if they want to attract the best players, as opposed to just saying, "Oh, you live in Bellevue, you're ours." If they wanted to go down to that city down south or out to Salt Lake, then you've got to give them a reason to want to join your academy. So I think that would be good, and I think it's going to happen in the next year or so.
So you brought up Tacoma a couple times here. Let's maybe dip into that for a second, because I think, in a good way, the separation between Sounders and Defiance, even just the branding change, as well as obviously the Reign going to Cheney, may have changed the dynamic in a really big way in Tacoma. Do you think that the level of attention, at a minimum, that the Reign have gotten recently sticks around, or are we still on World Cup high?
We say this a lot, but yes is the answer.
Yes.
I think obviously the Reign have done well to kind of capitalize on this, even if they haven't been so hot at home results. I was at the first game back where they got smashed by Chicago, and then I think they lost to Utah the other week. But aside, I think they've done well to, as I say, capitalize on the renewed interest. I think what is important, and this is probably a question to ask, their ownership, is what kind of investment they're prepared to make, not necessarily on the player side, because that's an NWSL issue at large, but certainly on the marketing side, to ensure that they're getting the level of engagement that they want down in Tacoma. But I think they've done well so far, and I think once they get the stadium situation resolved, which I have every reason to believe they're going to.
You're talking about the new
stadium, yes. Because I actually like Cheney for soccer, even though it is clearly a baseball stadium. It is intimate, but it's got a sufficient number of seats. The views are nice. It doesn't necessarily have the amenities surrounding the stadium, or any, for that matter.
Or exits.
Yeah, or exits. But again, that's not really an issue that the new stadium is necessarily going to solve, because it's likely going in the same area. So if they can get that over the line, and again, I have no reason to believe they won't, then they've got, they're going to have like a medical facility. It's $300 million worth of private investment. There'll be some public money in there as well, which I'm sure will, cause some heartburn for some folks down there. But I think as far as the Reign themselves, they'll be in a good position to capitalize and continue to capitalize on this, especially if they get stadium done. Now, whether there's a league for them to play in is another issue, and one that has not been guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination.
How much time do you have?
Yes. It's not in danger of going out of business tomorrow or anything like that, but there's still some structural issues with the league and how they operate. I know Grant Wall, I remember right after the World Cup, he said he's heard that there's no guarantee that the league will be around next year, which
it's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It would be a shocking turn of events. Again, I think it's highly unlikely to happen, but it's not impossible. And that by itself, it should be concern for fans of women's soccer who want to see it grow. U.S. Soccer has a management. We'll set aside the equal pay thing for just a second. But U.S. Soccer has a management agreement to help NWSL operate. That expires at the end of the year, basically, which means that either NWSL has to stand on their own 2 feet or work a deal with somebody else or U.S. Soccer. From what I heard, U.S. Soccer is not going to abandon them, quote unquote. So that's not a concern that anybody should have, even with the equal pay stuff. U.S. Soccer, they know that they would get raked over the coals if they were just to up and leave. So that's not going to happen. But U.S. Soccer, and I think they have a legitimate point, wants to see an exit strategy from the NWSL as to how they're going to sustain themselves going forward. Now, that doesn't need to be next year.
As in exit for U.S. Soccer.
Yeah, exit U.S. Soccer, because U.S. Soccer doesn't want to be in the business of operating a league, and that's not really their.
I mean, it works for MLS and some.
I'm not going to comment on that. But that's not what they're designed to do.
Right.
And putting those, again, they'll continue to support the league and do what they can to help foster growth. But what is the NWSL doing to, increase sponsorships and things like that? They got the Budweiser deal as well, and they got on TV with ESPN. I think they announced something today as well. So they're finally making some moves. I think it's just there's some frustration. I think Laura Harvey talked about this. Like, this should have been done in the lead up to the World Cup, and not afterwards. And
it's a get in before it gets real expensive.
Yeah.
Budweiser's like, oh, I am in.
Yeah, and they should have been able to do that, but they've been running a kind of bare bones operation on the marketing side, which you can talk. I'm sure you could speak to better than I could about what.
It's wildly inconsistent. Is what I've noticed, and like having friends who live in other places, and I have a ton of friends on the East Coast who follow whether it's like Sky Blue or some of the other teams, and like they will just never hear about anything. It's almost like there happens to be a team in your backyard, and that's crazy to me. And again, Reign have always had some just like way over the line players, every year, and that's been a luxury that even the Reign haven't necessarily taken the proper amount of advantage of.
Yeah, I think there's room for criticism there.
But it just feels like they're not really sure what they want to be. like all up as a league. And I think team by team, is in the same boat. And I think it's unclear whether they should take direction from the league level and kind of like, or just own it themselves and like funnel it out. It's wildly inconsistent. And while I think there have been some pleasing things that have come out of a great World Cup this year, like I've literally been trying to buy a 3-star Vapor Tobin Heath since 3 weeks before the final, and I haven't been able to buy one. And now it just literally doesn't exist. Like if I want an extra small, I can buy that. Like it physically isn't there. And what's cool about that is like Nike can't solve it. That's interesting. Like when you just think about the money that has been injected into the sport, hopefully money that had made its way to the players at some level, whatever. But it just feels like, is this going to fall off? Like, are we going to start 2020 and reboot and not really have the carryover, the success from 2019 lead into next year? And what I don't think we want to see is yet another league of haves and have-nots, because that's where teams just start to fold.
Yeah, and there's a team down south, obviously, that's doing very well. Utah has seen a bump as well, the rain as well. The game against Sky Blue that just happened, they got their best ever attendance.
Yep.
But Sky Blue has been a tire fire for its entire existence, essentially. And they're just now, because of all the pressure and all the stories about their owner, what's the governor's name? Murphy? Yeah. And how horribly he was running the team. And you've got teams like Orlando and Houston who aren't, Houston didn't have any World Cup players, I don't think. And their attendance has been pretty dismal. Kind of on par with the Houston Dynamo as well. So
weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there.
I mean, it's Houston.
Yeah. And then Orlando's not been so hot either, attendance-wise. And so, again, there's some structural issues with the league that have not been solved, which is obviously how to leverage the World Cup into higher attendance. Again, some of that has to do with the lack of investment in marketing and things like that. But there are issues beyond that even, especially when you talk about the pay structure for the women. And they just raised up with the last agreement, the minimum salaries to around $16,000 for a season, which is obviously nothing even if you're only playing for 4 or 5 months. That's still only like $50,000 a year over the course of a year. And then the women's national team players can't go abroad because their contracts are played by U.S. Soccer, and U.S. Soccer doesn't see fit to subsidize the salaries of, say, an Ada Hagelberg, who's playing over in, I think she's with Lyon, I think. Excuse me. So they're not in a position to really go grab the best 10 or 15 foreign women's national team players and subsidize their salaries and bring them over here. And would that even solve the issue? I don't know. So
I'm not sure it's a talent thing. I think there's a one part talent, one part marketing, one part ease of use. Like the ease of use level in Tacoma is actually better than Memorial, which if you think about that is scary. And as someone who lives in kind of a downtown area in Seattle, like I don't end up there because it's a huge pain for me to get there.
Yeah.
And I walk all day. I don't have a car, but for me to get there is really, really awkward as a city person. So what's it like for people who are coming from 10, 15 miles or Bellevue or whatever the heck it is? That's not great. Whereas here, not that it wasn't, let's say, a downer for a lot of people who are from like Seattle core to go to Tacoma, but they're like, well, I now know what my route is. Whether or not the transit is there doesn't necessarily matter, but I think they've just changed the dynamic. They changed the discussion in a way that's been really, really constructive.
Well, they're also not trying to fill 20,000 seats,
right?
this time.
Right,
so,
they're not worried about it.
Yeah,
Like Phil
so
6.
yeah, he's 6,500, 7,000. That's probably sustainable if they can do that on a consistent basis. At least if it a break even or make a slight profit, then that's fantastic because you're just trying to sustain at this point. And unfortunately, the rest of the league is not like the folks down I-5. But of course, that's the case in MLS writ large as well. So that's not necessarily fair on NWSL, considering unless you're the NFL or to a lesser extent the NBA, you're not filling all the stadiums of all 30 teams or however many you have. So that's, again, we'll see what happens in the off season. Like I said, they got to get the how they're going to fix the management agreement with U.S. Soccer.
Yep.
And then they got to talk about potential. I think they got to talk expansion, even if they do not have all of their teams currently in a place where it makes 100% sense to add teams. But I think you got to add a couple at least, maybe get up to 14 or so. And
I mean, definitely have an odd number. That makes it so much easier. Be totally sarcastic.
Yeah, I was about to say that makes a whole lot of sense. And then you can at least you can have 2 conferences. You can cut down on travel a little bit and do those kind of things. So even though they may not necessarily be in the best place to do that, they should probably look at expansion. And then the other issue is how they want the league to look structurally. Do they want to be associated with MLS or USL? I know there was a report that Louisville was looking to add a NWSL team because they're building their stadium.
Yep.
And honestly, that makes a whole lot of sense to me if they can find some solid USL teams to help with the
But this is where the
build dates with the
Portland
stadium.
model worked out really well.
Yeah.
And like, love them or hate them, they planned for it, and it's working really well.
Oh yeah, but the problem is it's not working well in Houston or Orlando, who have essentially the same model. And I don't know necessarily why that is, because at least Orlando's they had Marta, or they have Marta, I think, still.
Orlando surprises me.
Alex
Houston,
Morgan. Houston again.
There's mixed for me.
Yeah.
But I think there's the ownership model. There's the how you sell your tickets. There's the how you enable supporter groups, and they also do something at a slightly different flavor level. But
I mean,
and maybe it's just you struck while the iron was hot in the right place, and then people bought in immediately.
Well, yeah, it happened here in Seattle, obviously.
Yeah.
Happened in Portland. It's Atlanta. Love them or hate them. And LAFC, kind of the same thing. And Toronto was probably the first one to really, change the dynamic as far as like supporter culture goes. Aside from Portland, and to a lesser extent Seattle, NWSL hasn't necessarily figured out how to leverage that.
Yeah.
At this point, again, we're gonna have to wait and see how they restructure things after this, the management agreement expires, because they need to get that sorted out, because I think U.S. Soccer is putting in multiple millions of dollars aside from the players' subsidies or salary subsidies, which isn't, they subsidize, I think, around 18 players at this point. So even at $200,000 an average salary, it's not a whole lot of money.
Yeah,
it's a decent amount. But on top of that, they're helping with some of the operations and stuff like that. So, if they were not to be associated with U.S. Soccer, again, I do not expect that to happen. I think U.S. Soccer will continue to support them, but they still need to figure out again what they see themselves as, 5-8 years down the line.
And that's maybe the best part is I don't know if they know to do that. It just feels like they're operating.
Well, they didn't have a commissioner until last year.
Yeah. So,
which is bizarre, but I mean, I suppose if you're looking for the right person, it sometimes takes a while, as we found out with the U.S. men's national team coaching search. But they've got a lot of work to do, and they hopefully will be here next year to start to make those changes. Again, I think they will be, but the fact that there's even a whisper that they won't is something that should be alarming.
Take it seriously. Yeah. So, again, we're really early on time, which never happens, actually. We're usually like 8:58 rolling. Yeah. So we touched on Timbers. We touched on, we thought about the RSL match for 30 seconds.
I think that's about 28 seconds too long.
Touched on Galaxy. We touched on some contractual stuff and rain and Tacoma. A couple of random other things here and there.
So we talk about the ECS of it all.
Which thing?
The
you
incident.
You in the press booth on?
Yeah, I missed it until after the game. I didn't see or hear anything.
I wasn't there. I was on text and Twitter. I was at Hellbent. Shouts to Hellbent. I don't know. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I guess we can also combine it with what Portland put out today, as far as the statement is concerned.
It's
and
90% not surprising.
Yeah.
It's 10% y'all went on the offense and missed the point. It was like, and any statement that we don't believe this is wrong. And you're like, we actually didn't say that, but cool. They dug themselves in a hole today. And I had a conversation with, let's just say, influential people in the Sounders community who said, what did you think about the Portland Timbers statement today? And I told them, and they were like, okay. And I was like, are you reading the room to see what happens if you put out a statement?
Yes.
I got to tell you,
that is a question I would pose to some people as well.
Not great all up. Again, ECS has been rocking we've actually abbreviated because we've literally written it down so many times, but the anti-fascist, anti-racist, always Seattle banner is, what was that, November 2017. It's never been an issue in Cascadia. It's fine. Like, it's, quote, approved or grandfathered or whatever stupid word you want to use for it. LA Galaxy did not want it at the gate. It went in anyway. It was on the drum. Someone held the banner up at will. There was a lot of discussion about it. I honestly would pull the text because it was sent to me, so I'm going to go look it up because I think it's important if we're going to repeat it while we're sitting here. But the comment was essentially like, we want people on both sides to be able to attend soccer matches or want to attend something like that. And I was like, wait, someone said that in real life? Like, actually? And that's where, again, as like a marketing person, I would just go ban all the language. Like, don't even say that to someone. Just go, it's banned.
Yeah. Because,
like, I can disagree with you, but you're absolute. And this was like, you wanted to editorialize about it. And the moment you do that, like, you've opened the door.
Yeah.
And I'm going to break the door open. And we're going to rush in, like, every episode of, a zombie or a zombie show that you've ever seen. And that's the part where there was a miss.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, like, it didn't get taken away. There was a lot of debate back and forth, blah, 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 blah. Ultimately, Sean Wheeler, our other co-president, got ejected. It is what it is. We literally texted someone from the Sounders FO and apologized to Brian Schmetzer because people were going to walk out of the stadium. People walked out of the stadium. I know I have firsthand knowledge that Galaxy people were like, this is bullshit. This isn't us as people, this, that, and the other thing. It was not great. And again, as someone who works in business, like, I understand policy and whatever, but you waited basically 2/3 of the way through the game and then ejected somebody for something that, like, really no one agreed with, including the people who were, like, there to enforce taking it away in the first place. And that was, like, again, Heather and I walking out of the stadium in Vancouver. The cops were like, we think this is dumb. We were like, cool. We knew that. Like, it was fine. And, Sean's like, okay. I'll leave.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, and this is something I told the Sounders the first night that we had the Iron Front flag in Seattle, I was like, you've already lost. Like, you will not win this war. Like, you come throw us out, please.
Yeah.
Like, I never want to be thrown out of the stadium, ever. Like, en masse. I don't want people walking out, ever. However, the moment that they, like, moved, turned the knob the other way, like, it changed the discussion. And what I was really proud of was people who were like, you know what, I'm going to stay and support the team. And other people were like, I need to prove a point here. And that was interesting. It was good to see. Yet again, though, like, the last thing anyone ever wants to do is get Portland and Seattle to agree on something.
Yeah.
And, like, Sean at one point sent me a screenshot of his phone, and he had, like, 300 retweets of something. Like, it was some absurd thing. Yeah. And that was how, like, the ECS account and mine and Sean's and others went for, like, 2 days. And, again, not that that's a measure of success by any means, but the amount of support versus counter, it's 90-10 would be generous to the 10, bluntly. And some of that's bots on the internet, you know? But generally speaking, we're in this, like, 90-10 scenario. And to me, like, this is principle, not let's cause issues for anyone,
Well, I'm obviously interested to see what's going to happen this Friday.
Me too.
And
Are you going to Portland?
No, I will be on kid duty, so
cool.
Unfortunately I can't go. But I'll be watching, and there will be some guests there for the match from MLS HQ. And so, if people are planning to make to send a message, this would be a game with which to do so, because there will be people there to see it and hear it. And
wait, which guests do you mean?
Not the soccer don, but basically all of his
cool, because I told him to fuck off this week, and he hasn't responded to me. It's weird. I thought I'd get like a fave or something.
Yeah, you did, yeah. Maybe he'll be here there. I have no information on that, but there are going to be a number of MLS high.
A number to me sounds like a low
representatives.
Low estimate.
Yeah. So, again, if people want to send a message, that would be an ideal game to do so. And
why you gotta telegraph ideas, Mr. Turner?
I'm not telling you what to say. I'm just telling you there will be people there to see it.
Yeah, without saying anything at all, ever. All I will say is there are literal thousands of really motivated people who do and do not sit in the supporter sections, and I am excited to see how Friday goes.
Yeah,
and that's all I'll say.
I'll be very interested.
At the end of the day, though, it's still like, don't become a distraction. So how do you do something constructive or stick to your convictions, but still support the players, because you're in the stadium for a reason. So what I believe everybody has consciously thought about is that. And like, how do you do things appropriately? Because otherwise, just stand outside the stadium and make a mess. I'll be really interested to see, like, given some of the tensions in Portland this last weekend and just other stuff that's happened. That was my newscaster word that I would use to describe what happened in Portland. There were some good dancing banana people. It was a lot of fun, but genuinely, from a people safety standpoint, I know and believe that everybody's like, I got this, not going to step out of line. I've been genuinely impressed with how Portland supporters, Seattle supporters, and others have handled themselves in tense situations. And
what I don't want, anything really.
What I don't want, though, is to
consider a problem.
Turn this idea of Friday into some sort of antagonistic bullshit, because that's not what anything is about. Yeah. It's like, go support, love your team, move on.
Yeah, I think from the MLS, or reading their, between the lines on their stuff, it seems to me that they thought or think, I don't know if they still think this, but they thought that this would all just blow over.
Wait,
at
weird.
some point.
MLS
Yeah.
underestimated something?
Yeah.
No.
Like the quote, I think the quote associated with their philosophy is endure, which basically means weather this storm, and at some point something bright and shiny will occupy other people's time. And I don't know if that's still what they think. It might be. They're pretty insular in that building. It's they've got they're on Fifth Ave in New York.
They have an unlimited supply of Girl Scout cookies.
Yeah,
let's be clear.
They don't have to ever leave that
Girl
place.
Scouts are straight up HQ'd in that building. So if they want trefoils, they just walk down the hall. They get some trefoils. They dip them in some tea, and it's all okay.
Yeah.
So
they're very insular, and I don't know if they understand what their position is doing to the league, and I don't know if they think. They don't think that this is going to result in any significant repercussions, whether it's season ticket sales or boycotts and walkouts, which affect the atmosphere at games. The
amount of DMs I've gotten with people's screen grabs of their email communications canceling their season tickets is, I'm going to say it's a double-digit number. That's not 11.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll say. The gravity of the situation to me is far beyond what I would have expected it to be.
Yeah.
Did we break the internet?
I think we might have.
Cool.
Are we offline? Oh no, we're back. We were back.
We were or we're not back.
Yeah.
Our
Lost
out.
video, but I think we're still broadcasting audio.
All right. I think we lost our video, so you are correct. I can see the camera being unhappy.
I think we're back. Sort of. Well, while you try to fix it, I'll continue to finish my point.
Would anyone ever release numbers of the messages they're getting from the people who think that the Antifa stuff? Because they say a number of people. Well, 5 is a number.
Yes. Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, Tom, you talked about it's kind of 90-10, and that's probably what it is. It's probably a distinct minority of people who are offended and talk about how they go to sporting events to escape real life and what.
I'm offended by this blue background color right here, right now.
And we're now doing some type of
I got nothing.
vertigo thing. Well, to finish up, the number is probably 90-10. I don't have any specific information on that. And so the question obviously follows, why is less focusing on the 10%? And the answer is probably the screaming vocal minority, and they're worried about ending up on Sean Hannity's show and getting bad press from Fox News, even though that's not really the demographic of most MLS fans in general, and certainly Sounders fans in particular. Or Portland or Vancouver for that matter.
I mean, there was some good Fox News coverage last weekend, or the weekend before, but whatever. And again, I understand the, quote, fear in those situations, but it just feels like it misses the point, and when anyone is empowered to ever use a phrase like both sides, read the room a little. And to be honest, if you wanted to say, hey, not everyone's comfortable with what you're saying, that's actually a perfectly, I'm going to say, acceptable. That is a more reasonable response to that situation. The moment you say something like, both sides should be able to go to soccer games, you're like, oh,
what is the other
now
side
I'm
that
definitely
you would like
holding
to go to
this
these
two-pole
games?
up higher than before. And again, there's a difference between saying people have different levels of comfort, or people are unaware, or they don't know what this means. Those are, in some cases, actually reasonable discussions. In others, they are wildly overrated. This has been super binary, and it's not productive at the end of the day. So again, we could go off on this for 300 hours.
Yeah. Should we talk a little bit about the Portland game at least as far as predictions and what have you.
Yes.
As we come to the end of another show.
I see our stream health is red.
I assume that's good.
That's what happens when karaoke shows up at the bar. They all plug in and start like stealing our bandwidth. So predictions. I'm gonna say 2-1 Sounders.
I was thinking 2-2, which is an unfortunate
Who wants
result.
to lose the Cascadia Cup,
Yeah,
Mickey? What the hell? Victories or
I would
GTFO?
I would be a bit more confident if I hadn't seen what I saw on Saturday. But they'll get a full week of training in. If they are able to make some personnel changes, and Cecchini has looked good in training from what I've seen. So I bet he slots in there somewhere if he is eligible this week. It's not even so much the issue of them needing to find a international slot or move a player. I don't think that's like Dallas, for example, has like 5 of them and can't use them. So I think Garth talked about how they are of minimal value to the teams that have them right now, because you're not typically bringing in anybody at this point. So, assuming he is eligible this week, I would not be shocked, just based on what I've seen, that he gets in there at some point, because now he will have been training for about 3 weeks, so he should be reasonably fit. And so the question is, does he cure what ails the Sounders? Excuse me.
What about the Sonics?
Yeah, well, decide to bring him back. The question is really, the question is he what cures what ails them? And from my perspective, it has to do with their inability to win the ball in midfield and transition into attack quickly. And if he can do that, then I think they've got a chance. Because again, I don't think Portland is any great shakes at this point. They haven't shown that they are particularly dynamic where they're going to overrun decent teams. But again, if the Sounders can't sort out their defensive issues, then it's going to be a problem. But that's why I think you've got right now 2 flawed teams, and so the good news is that means probably lots of goals and it'll be entertaining.
I think Hunch posts, if they win, it might turn the season, and I would agree with that.
Yeah,
and this is like that.
100% agree.
What was that? 2015 Timbers beat Galaxy like 5-1 or 5-2, like August or September,
Yeah,
and just like
ran
burned through people
Yeah.
after that point. And I think that's where, like what I had said earlier, like the motivation of defeating Portland in a year
Yes.
where, yet again, U.S. Open Cup, yet again, like the demoralization of the team.
The playoff game last year.
Yeah, it's just like
the series. Yeah, they've had the Sounders number over the last 2 years, and that should provide, again, accepting that the Sounders won down there last year, accepting that it's time to turn this page on this terrible August that they've had.
So 2-2.
I think 2-2 is a fair shout.
Any other calls for the match, things that people should look out for, other stuff you want to talk about, how much you like trefoils and tea?
No.
Ejections? I mean...
Oh, yeah, the over-under on total number of...
I thought you were talking about player ejections.
Yes.
I mean, okay.
I am super okay if they're, really not amusing. Brian, dude, gets ejected. There are, Chara can get ejected every game forever, for all I care.
He's guaranteed to get a yellow. He was on yellow card accumulation
I'm
and
gonna
somehow
say,
was on his best behavior.
Forget that for a second. I'm going to say no one gets ejected from the stands. I'm an optimist. I'm sorry. My bad.
Yeah.
Mickey Turner, what do you got?
On ejections?
Mickey Turner's like the entire press box
Yes.
is ejected.
Yes. I'll stay on this side of optimism as well, and I'll say there are 2 ejections, but for alcohol-related reasons.
That's like a mail-in response
Yes.
to this. Come on. All right. Mike says, are there any supporters left in the stadium at the end of the match?
Well, things go pear-shaped.
At the moment, I'm going to say no. But again, if it's like 5-3 somebody,
yeah, it could
you
change
never know
things,
what's
yes.
going to happen. I'm going to say, honestly, I don't think there's like mass ejections. But I've been super wrong before, and we'll probably be super wrong later in the week. What's going on? Anything else you want to talk about? We actually made it under time.
Yeah. No, not at this point. Should be a good week of training. And
Will you be periscoping from training?
I'll be periscoping from training. And potentially from other places, but I'll talk about that offline. So you guys who were not here will miss out.
Nice. All right. Have a good night. Thanks, everybody here
I
at the
normally
Berliner.
wave. And
Thanks to the Berliner. Night, Mickey.
night
You
talk.
guys can't see us. We're waving at each other,
Yeah.
but it's cool. Night.